The End of the Marine by Y.A. Baylor. All rights reserved. Chapter 1. I was recruited to be a murderous counter-assassin by my unit's chaplain. Well, that is not completely true, but he did have a hand in it. And not that he knew that was what he was doing when he passed the phone number on to me. All he knew was that an informal call had gone out to chaplains that there was a second chance program for officers who had gotten into minor trouble that was nonetheless likely to end their careers in the military. I never found out the exact criteria that Fitz forwarded to chaps, or why the chaplains were the conduit. All I knew was that Chaplain Champlain called me into his office a couple of days before my NJP and told me that the outlook for my career was grim. I sat in the parishioner's chair across the desk from him.
I understand you will have office hours for conduct unbecoming, and will be awarded a letter of admonishment in your record if the general goes by the precedent she set.
I looked across at him bleakly. That is what the JAG is telling me. He said the BOI is then probably going to recommend a general discharge. I paused a moment and smiled a little ruefully. Under honorable conditions, so I've got that going for me. He did not return the grin. He was an odd specimen for a chaplain, taller than my 5'11", with broad shoulders. His navy khaki shirt seemed tailored to his torso and showed considerable time working out. In our social discussions at happy hour and after services, he told me he had been an enlisted SEAL. Used his GI Bill to go to seminary at the end of his active service, and then came back in the Navy as a Lutheran minister. When I asked him why he did not wear a SEAL trident on his uniform, he told me,
My killing days are over, Jack, and the trident just gets in the way of trying to reach bosun mates and straight-leg Marines who are my flock.
Back at his office, he said to me,
Oh, well, I know this seems like the end of the world, and this is easy for me to say, but your life is not over. You will get through it.
I shrugged a little and looked down. I had been stupid and arrogant and made a mistake that I had seen my Marines and others make 1,000 times, thinking that what happened overseas would stay there. It hadn't. He was speaking again.
Have you talked to Jan S.?
As far as I know, she's oblivious. I have not heard anything from her, only from her divorce lawyer. I looked around for a divorce mouthpiece of my own. The JAG representing me from Hawaii gave me the "not me" and told me to talk to base legal, which we don't have here. Things seemed final. He nodded and looked out the window.
It sure has been hot lately.
The conversation meandered, which was strange, since he called me. Dave, why am I here? He suddenly looked uncomfortable, like he noticed his shoes were pinching a little.
I have a line on an opportunity.
An opportunity? To go to seminary or something? What are you saying?
No, nothing like that. It is some kind of standing opportunity for Marine officers in your situation.
He tailed off. What are you talking about, Dave? My situation? Screw-ups? You want to trot me out onto a stage to tell the lance corporals not to be like me? He pulled himself together.
No. Some organization is looking for Marine officers in your situation to give you a second chance.
I needed clarification. An organization? Like AA or something? He looked at me sharply.
Why would you say AA? Have you been drinking?
No, Dave, come on. I let my little head do the thinking in Australia and I wrecked my life. Not because I was drunk, but because that blonde with the accent and the long coat. And drinking just has not seemed that appealing to me lately. He looked somewhat relieved.
Good. I did not think you had been hitting the bottle, but I had to ask.
He reached under his oversized GSA calendar on his desk and pulled out a sticky note with something written on it. He looked at it for another second, then up at me.
I am on a subreddit for Navy chaplains where we discuss issues anonymously. Someone came on a few months ago, calling himself Fitz, and said that he represented an organization that was recruiting Marine officers who were in trouble, but who were still otherwise. What did he call them? Solid citizens. You fit the profile in a couple of other ways. A security clearance, physically fit, no drug offenses, genuinely remorseful for the conduct, and not just for getting caught, and ready to take their medicine. Smart and not self-evidently crazy. And the chaplain had to like the cut of the officer's jib.
He looked embarrassed, reciting that last part.
There were other criteria as well, but you fit them all.
I wondered where this was going. Chap seemed vaguely disquieted with the conversation, but this was not cheery for either of us when you got down to it. I waited.
Fitz left a phone number and said that if we ever came across some solid citizen who needed a second chance, to give him or her, he noted this number.
He held up a sticky note.
A 202 area code.
DC.
I called it to see if it was some scam.
A puzzled look came over his face as he recounted the conversation.
No formal greeting, just a pleasant woman who said hello. I introduced myself as Chaplain Champlain and asked to talk to Fitz. A couple of minutes later, Fitz came on the line. I realized it must have been 0300 in the States, so I apologized. He ignored that and asked if I needed a second chance, so I said no. I told him I had read his post on Reddit, but I was not convinced this was on the up and up. To that, he said.
I interrupted. Just Fitz? He didn't introduce himself more fully? The chaplain shook his head.
No, he introduced himself as Fitz. Had a Midwestern voice, sounded young and amazingly wide awake. He said I was not the first chaplain to call based on that post, so he did not mind amplifying a little, if I would like.
I just stared at the chaplain, again wondering where this was going. But since he seemed to want a prompt, I said, "So what then?"
He reiterated that he was recruiting for a specific kind of character that his psychologists told him would be present in Marine officers, who were in a little bit of trouble, not drug-related, had a high G2, and who were willing to take chaplains into confidence. He assured me that there were a lot more screens than that, but if I had a candidate, Fitz would fly that Marine to an interview location for further interviews, no strings attached, then fly them back to wherever they wanted to go. He made a point of saying, "You can assure them that I will pay for their lodging and per diem as well."
That almost made me laugh. Sounded like a guy who knows Marines. I pointed at the sticky note. That's Fitz's number?
Yes, or it was a couple of months ago. You are the first Marine officer.
He looked down, a little embarrassed. Then he looked back up into my eyes.
You are the first Marine, or frankly, any officer who I have encountered who would meet the criteria. Do you want the number?
Sure, what the hell? No. Pardon me, Padre. He waved me off. I'm probably going to be looking for work before long, so I might as well start now.
One caveat. Don't dither. He said that you need to make contact before you get discharged, or there is no deal.
Did he say dither, or are you paraphrasing?
He may have said Terry. Either way, it seemed important to get with him sooner rather than later.
I took the sticky note. We chatted a bit longer, making promises to have dinner. Promises we would never keep, and I left. I had known the chaplain for a couple of years at a previous deployment and liked him. It was a pleasant surprise to bump into him in the little commissary the Sings had built for the Americans on the Changi Naval Base, and I found out he was the lead chaplain on the USS Enterprise stationed there now. I soon learned how fortunate it was for me, although I have often wondered if fortunate was the right word for where I found myself. I used to joke that my mother would give me gifts that ended up costing me a lot of money. Like a box of pearls that a jeweler had to drill to set. Or my grandfather's Rolex that cost me more to refurbish than it was worth. The chaplain's contact changed my life and solved my immediate problem. But the cost was extremely high.